People say, I don't want a mediator, it's voluntary.
Yeah.
I want a decision.
Right.
I want a binding decision.
Right.
So they go to the same type of person who offers the same service as mediation, but instead they hire them, and it has to be voluntary. Both spouses have to agree on that arbitrator.
Right.
They hire that person to be the arbitrator. They sign an agreement, and in the agreement it says, you will make a decision. We will be bound by your decision. And if we don't like your decision, we have rights of appeal that are very limited.
Right.
So that if they don't like the end result, they don't have many options on appeal. They might only be able to appeal an error in law. Maybe the arbitrator applied the wrong law, but they can't appeal an error of fact. Maybe the arbitrator found the person's income to be $50,000 when they were certain their income was $40,000, but the arbitration agreement says error in fact, you can't appeal it.
So that's a huge decision, choosing that arbitrator. I mean, this is God, basically. This is someone going...
You're choosing a judge.
You're choosing a judge.
You're hiring a private judge.
But how can two people who are sort of, as you said, adversarial, choose that person? That must be quite a process.
Well, first of all, you have to ask your question, why are they choosing arbitration over court?
Okay.
So the
Money,
first question
it's got to be financial.
So some people will choose because they think court's going to be more expensive.
Yes.
Some people will choose arbitration because it'll be private.
Right.
And they don't want their case drudged through the court.
Right.
Some people choose arbitration because they believe it'll be faster.
Right.
If you have a private arbitrator, you're going to say, I'm meeting with them next week. Whereas if you are relying on the court system,
right,
which is the public system, you may not get a court date for months.
Right. And then there you are on page 3 of the National Post.
That's right.
Right.
So there's many reasons why people choose arbitration. Those are 3 of them. But assuming you choose, and by the way, there's mediation, we just mentioned, there's arbitration, we just mentioned, and then there's the hybrid. There's where you choose someone to be a mediator / arbitrator.
Yeah.
And that's where you sign on to a mediator, but in the agreement it says if the mediator is unable to reach a resolution with the parties, it turns into arbitration with the same person under the same contract, and the arbitrator then hears submissions, hears evidence, and makes decisions.
So what's the mediator gets fed up, throws up his hands and says, that's it. I'm arbitrating. I'm sure that's happened.
Yes, or one of the spouses.
Says, okay.
Or one of the spouses says, you know what, we've mediated this for 10 hours, we're getting nowhere, I want to have a decision.
Okay.
And that's what arbitration is.
So it switches in, isn't that interesting?
And you can't get out.
Right. So some people, wait a sec, do some people walk into these meetings thinking it's mediation, and the time they walk out, they've been arbitrated? Is that correct?
Because the mediator arbitrators have to comply with government regulations.
Right.
Which sets out that it has to be done by contract.
Okay.
The contract has to be reviewed by the person with legal counsel.
Okay.
They cannot just show up and be arbitrated. There has to be a mediation arbitration agreement that is reviewed, edited, signed with counsel.
So do they and I'm just curious, I didn't know this is interesting. So you are in a mediation situation, it's going nowhere. Do they not take a time out and say, we'll come back tomorrow? Or
you never find a mediation turning into arbitration on the same day.
Right, I figured that. They go cool off, everyone
in fact,
home.
there might be, things might get so hot that the mediator arbitrator will declare at a truce that day.
Right.
And then have 2 or 3 weeks later a teleconference with the lawyers for the parties.
Right.
And say, do you think we could have another mediation?
Okay.
Can we park that issue and come back for a mediation on something else? The 2 lawyers might very well say, you know what, we're running out of time, we're running out of money, let's have an arbitration, and then at that point the arbitrator will have what's called a pre-arbitration conference, where we now line up what the issues are, what the evidence will be, who goes first, who goes second, and what the arbitrator has to decide.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And so is this, now you said people consider arbitration and mediation to be cheaper. Is it than going to court, or is that...
The answer is it depends.
I knew it. Good answer.
Because there are cases that are a one-issue case with very little evidence.
Okay.
Like, for example, there's a pension.
Yeah.
And the pension, if husband retires at 55, it's going to be worth $200,000.
Yeah.
But if husband retires at 65, it's worth $150,000.
Right.
Well, wife says husband's going to retire at 55 and wants half of $200,000.
Right.
Husband says, I'm not retiring at 55, I'm going to retire at 65. It's going to be $150,000. Well, if we go through the court system, they might spend $30,000, $40,000 in legal fees waiting till they get to trial.
Right.
If they go to arbitration, it might be a one-day arbitration at the cost of $5,000.
Okay.
So that's an example. where arbitration is cheaper and faster.
Okay.
But there are cases where the arbitration is more expensive. Why? Because when you go to court, you pay your lawyer. You don't pay for the judge. That comes out of your tax dollars.
Okay.
When you go to arbitration, you pay your lawyer, plus you pay the arbitrator.